Well, that seems a little biased.
I don't think I have to be unbiased for to be here.
Hey, Jake,
Yeah.
question for you before we start. I was asking regards to this Alameda Federal slowing um, press release. Do you know when that went out? I have so many emails in my inbox. I want to search and see if I got that, but if not, I'll email Alan and ask him to add me to that.
It wasn't that long ago. I can see if I can forward it to you. I think it was less than 2 weeks ago for
Will you
sure.
just let me know like what day and time, and I'll just go there and look for it chronologically. Save you the effort.
Yep.
Thank
Uh,
you.
unless you know off the top of your head, Nick.
I'm using the good old search my filing
Yeah, so am I, and
system
I'm not.
search.
I think it was the 24th of June, it looks like.
Okay, thank you. It's weird because I've gotten the ones about the I-25 closure,
Oh yeah, that is strange.
right?
I
Yep.
also didn't get the launch email either. Hi, this is Tinsley. For the new transparency website. Is that what you guys are talking about?
We're just talking about the press releases in general. I assumed it would be an
Yeah.
all or nothing thing, and clearly I assumed wrong, it looks like.
Sparingly, like I've been getting some and not others.
Okay,
So
curious.
it's weird.
Well, maybe that's good. They're using filters, so we don't end up with every little one, but
No, we would have wanted you guys to get.
I've only gotten.
oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. 1:20 p.m. on the 24th. Mayor Mike Johnson, joined by Amy Ford. Subject heading is Mayor Mike Johnson announces targeted effort to reduce traffic fatalities in Denver.
Yep. That's the one.
Yeah. Cool.
You got it?
All right. Yeah, from Nancy Kuhn. I hope I'm saying that right.
I usually go with Kuhn, but
Kuhn. It's a umlaut U.
That's what at least I've gone with. Maybe just to feel exotic.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know what an umlaut does. I know what it is, but
All right. I love witty banter for the recording people, especially, but we do have a pretty tight agenda today, so I'm probably going to jump right into it here and open our meeting. Alan, I believe you're on roll call today. Is that right?
Yes, I am substituting. Gary is out, so I am doing notes and roll call today. So I'll just go through real quick. Gary is out. Amy Contreras, are you here? Aileen? Joe Levy. Joe, I think, is going to be here later. I don't see him yet, though. Paul Gonzer.
here.
Paul, I saw you. Andy, I saw you. Christopher Johnson, are you here? Okay, Julie. Julie, are you here?
I am here,
Welcome.
and I'll come on camera when I'm done stuffing my face.
Great. Welcome, Julie. It's great to have you. I saw Tinsley. June Churchill, I see you here. Ian, are you here?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Great. Welcome. Alicia Brown. Brian Carroll.
Hello.
Welcome, Brian. Director Lewis.
Present.
Welcome. Jonathan Pira, I saw your photo here, and
Yes.
I think that is it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 currently, with more expected here in the coming minutes.
Right.
11. I forgot to count myself.
Okay, good. It's like I was like 11's quorum, so I'm not sure we can approve our meeting minutes, but With that being said, now that we have a quorum, can we get a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes?
Yes.
And a second.
Motion.
Sorry.
Second.
Awesome. Any opposed? I'm just gonna go that way on the meeting minutes. I think I'm gonna have unanimous yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
All right, perfect. Hearing no abstentions, the meeting minutes are approved. Kicking it over to public comment. Do we have any public commenters, Ninita?
No, we do not.
No, okay. Well, great. Deputy Director Williams, I think we get to
Jake,
kick
real
it.
quick, did we do our interpretation announcement, or did I miss that?
No, we did it.
Nope. Thank you, Alan. Sorry. Let's do that. Interpretation announcement.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Francisco Picao. I'm from Language Access LLC, and I have the pleasure, together with Dwayne Steele, to be your interpreters this afternoon. As part of the efforts of the city to reach out to the community at large, the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure organizes Spanish interpretation for meetings such as this. If you have never had an opportunity to use this service before, please click on the little globe, interpretation globe, and select the language of your choice. Buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos a esta reunión. Mi nombre es Francisco Picado, soy de Language Access LLC. Junto con Dwayne Stillwell, tenemos el honor de ser sus intérpretes esta tarde. Como parte de los esfuerzos de la ciudad por comunicarse con los sectores más amplios de la población, ofrece el Departamento de Infraestructura y Transporte ofrece interpretación al español en reuniones como esta. Para si no ha usado este servicio antes, por favor, pulse el globito en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla donde dice interpretación y seleccione el idioma de su preferencia. Thank you, Alan.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan, for the reminder. We have some topics today that we're extra glad that people will be able to hear in their native tongue. All right. Sorry for the delay, Deputy Director Williams. Are you ready for us for our update?
I am. Yes, got a few items here. One I'll just touch on that we're going to talk about a little bit later. And I think Amy is actually planning to join us. Amy Ford, our executive director, is planning to join to give an update on the speed announcement that was made late last month. We were discussing this before the meeting gets started. I think our mailing list might not have been up to snuff for that one. So do apologize for that. And I'll work with our comms person to make sure folks are being communicated with on those things. But that very exciting announcement really kind of starting to dive more into Mayor Johnston's priorities around transportation and traffic safety specifically. So I don't want to ruin Amy's presentation, so I will stop there. And certainly we'll have some time for questions with that. Another announcement, one I'm personally very excited to make, wanted to introduce a new key staff person for DOTI that you will likely see much more of on this committee. So Elena McWhorter is joining us today and has joined DOTI from Parks and Rec. And Elena is our senior legislative affairs specialist on here. We've actually been without for about 6 months since the beginning of the year when her predecessor departed to start up his own shop out there. And so I'm very excited for the department, but most of all excited for me to have some very strong help on there. So I think maybe Elena figured out how to pin herself on there. So I see her. Hello, Elena.
Hi, everyone. Excited to be here and learning a ton already. I'm excited to work with the board on all of your priorities for the department moving forward.
We are excited to have her. I'm just going to speak for the committee.
Welcome, Elena.
Budget, really not much to report. We're kind of in this quiet period right now where submissions are in the mayor's hand as he and his team form what is ultimately the mayor's budget. We've talked about that a number of times. There's not a DOTI budget. There's not a Parks to budget. it is the mayor's budget that goes for. So that is more to come on that. Certainly that will start to get more exciting and more engaging here in the next few months. Also wanted to give an update on sidewalks on there. So the stakeholder committee that is working on recommending, has worked on recommending amendments to the sidewalk initiative 307 Denver Visitors sidewalks on there, has settled on a kind of slate of recommendations right now. Where we're at is working through making sure that Mayor Johnston and his team is briefed on that. And then as soon as we've completed that process, likely by the end of this month, we will move into the council process for that. And that's obviously where the rubber meets the road. In the end, this is an ordinance and it is within the authority of city council to amend on there. But we think the stakeholder recommendations are strong, reasonable, and I think make improvements to it. And Elena and I were just talking about it. I'm excited to get this off the ground. It's been kind of here at DOTI for quite some time, since November of 2022, and a lot of work has gone into it, and to really get ripping on making some sidewalks out there and repairing sidewalks on there. You may have seen though in the interim period since we've last met, City Council did pass an ordinance or amend the ordinance to have billing start no later than January of 2025. While we are very excited to get this done, what we don't want to do is start sending out bills, certainly before City Council has an opportunity to make amendments that they see fit, and really be making sure that our billing system, the bills, so basically this will be a new line on your stormwater bill. And the bills, we want to make sure that those are accurate. We want to start off on a great foot with residents on that. And so certainly that is something that we concurred with, even though we are as probably excited as anybody, maybe not Jill, but after Jill, we are as excited as anybody to get this up and running on there. And I see a question, Tinsley. And Tinsley, you're on mute.
Just to your very last point, when you do plan on launching, I know there was, for this last program that you just talked about, there was definitely some learning experiences I know made with the launch of adding a bill for people with the trash receptacles and the recycling bins and things like that. So I'm wondering kind of if you can go into what lessons that maybe DOTI did learn and how to launch better for the community so that everybody's kind of on the same page, or kind of if you could go maybe into the plan just a little bit more in depth.
Sure. So we've started to, and you've probably seen a few different items pop up. So kind of one of our initial one was we've got a website that we utilize, and under the original ordinance as written, we had a calculator tool on there that really engendered a lot of attention to it on it. We did quite a bit of press with that. We have started to put, since again, this will be a new line on your storm bill, best place to let folks know where that's going to be is in your storm bill. And so you'll have seen, if you're a Denver resident getting these storm bills, you'll see notices say, hey, don't forget, these bills are up and coming on there. And then we are also, again, this is very similar. If you followed any of the conversation around the billing delay, the challenge that puts us with is we're not collecting those program funds. And so we are limited within our current existing budget on what we can do. But as we get into collecting funds, you will see much more of that education going out on there. So in the meantime, really, we're trying to utilize existing resources, working with city council offices, making sure it's announcements as they come up are getting out in their newsletter and trying to that. But certainly if there's areas where you think it is beneficial for us to be able to come out and talk to groups about that. This is a little bit of a weird period right now where we're kind of in a flux period, but happy to talk in generalities and before very long, within the next few weeks, we'll be into specifics on that. Yeah.
I have actually is because this is a small issue with a lot of issues that could actually come together for a community meeting. So I wouldn't necessarily make that on its own, but what I do suggest is when you are making the flyer or any of the program materials, to make sure that it's very clear, not very detailed, but just the details you need to know, but that it's also English and Spanish, flip.
Absolutely.
Because there was a lot of confusion in Green Valley Ranch about some of the other charges that they're receiving, especially for the, like I said, the trash receptacles and things
Yeah.
like that. So I just want to make sure that that's honored, that when you guys do something.
100%.
Thank you.
Yep, 100%. June.
Yeah, another question on sidewalks, but more on the actual implementation side. If we're expecting the first billing cycle to be early next year, is DOTI expecting to bond out that revenue to get like a big burst of sidewalk construction done? Or are you planning to sort of build sidewalks as the money comes in? Just sort of curious about what the implementation is going to look like now that it's actually happening.
So June, I am not a financial person, and this answer will prove that on here. But my understanding around how bonding and enterprise funds work is just like as a person with credit, you have to build up, you know, the bond market's going to want to see that, okay, you guys are collecting, you've collected for a couple of years on there. Now you've got the credit to go out and bond against that. All of that is still to be kind of planned out with that initial implementation plan that's spelled out on there. But my general understanding is that we would not be able to day one send the bills out, that afternoon go out to the bond market on there, just because we don't have the credit, you know, in a very simplified sense on there. But certainly the bonding, you know, as soon as that is prudent, that is assumed in the ordinance on that. And we would, as we kind of make more decisions on the timing of that, we can have some folks that can give you a more detailed answer than what I just provided on there. But
Nick,
that's my
I think
current
at a high
understanding.
level,
What?
Nick, I think at a high level, you captured it perfectly, because it also kind of, given where we are right now and the amount of sort of implementation work that still needs to be done on the front end, you don't want to go out and bond money that you can't quite, one, you don't know quite how much you need as of yet. And then two, you don't quite have your plan firmed up to begin to execute once you have the dollars. And so the idea is to be prepared in advance of that. And so, yes, like Nick said, also credit is the same way in the bond markets. You got to have some history. You have to have proof that money's coming in to support debt service. And so once we have that and all those things put together, then that'll put us in a better shape or a better position to go out and execute that as needed.
Okay, so what I'm hearing then is potentially for the first few years of the sidewalk program, we'll sort of be building out sidewalks as we get money in. And then maybe at some undetermined point in the future, that's when we send out the big bond issuance and we just do a massive surge of sidewalk building. Is that approximately what I'm hearing?
I would say approximately, and I would say the details of this are definitely to come on that. And so these are kind of general high level answers of what the initial strategy would be. And I was so glad that Earl was able to jump in on there.
Yeah, and then Nick, I think just on background there, like we have to actually ramp up capacity on concrete manufacturing, right? Like is also a factor here.
A great point that there are a zillion details that we will kind of trying to be simultaneously iron out and get all of those puzzle pieces to fit together and become beautiful sidewalks on there. But great point, Jake. There's a lot of factors. We're on the vanguard with this, and that's what makes it exciting. But you know, that's part of the challenge with this is making sure all those pieces are together, that this runs as smoothly as possible.
Yeah. There's an old saying, right? The best time to build a sidewalk is 20 years ago.
That's right.
Trees.
You're making me hungry for an elephant. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Nick. Does that conclude your updates?
Concludes my report. Happy to answer any other questions, but those were great questions.
Right. Nick, the next item on our agenda was that Federal and Alameda speed reduction. Are we a little early for Amy's appearance?
It would appear, I just double checked on there. I certainly, if I don't know if we want to take something out of order, and then if she's not able to make it, I know she has another event that she was going to step out of. I can then cover it at that point. Defer to obviously the committee and the chair.
Okay,
and
perfect.
I'm available if you want me to jump in, Nick. So I'm here.
Hello.
Hello.
We have Maggie for 25 minutes. Is that too long, Nick?
I think that's up to us how we treat
Okay.
Maggie. So I
And
will.
I'm happy if Amy jumps in, I can cede the floor to her if you guys don't mind
Yeah.
getting a little bit of whiplash that way. But that way we can just keep things rolling if that makes sense to everyone.
Awesome. Yes, Maggie, do you mind if I do a quick introduction into why you're joining the call?
Sure, go for it. I'm working on sharing my screen, so I'll.
Perfect. Hopefully while that's getting going, I just wanted to give a quick overview. Alan and I and Nick and Amy have been talking about district updates for our various districts, and we wanted to start getting updates from the team working in those districts so that we could have a better understanding of what's going on in those districts. We've done a lot of macro things on this board, but we really wanted to have the opportunity to really treat each district in the way that it needs to be treated. So we're going to try to have these on many board meetings in the future, hopefully hopefully at every monthly meeting, but scheduling and stuff may change that. Our first one is District 11, and we do have an incredibly packed meeting, and I made promises to staff on timing. So what I would like to propose is that we have Maggie give the presentation in full, and then we open up to questions just so that we have time for everything today. And with that, I'll kick it over to you, Maggie. Thank you for letting me have that monologue.
Awesome, Jake. I really appreciate that. Can everyone hear me okay? Just want to make sure my system's all set up. Excellent, excellent. Hey, Tinsley. So great to be here today. Just like Jake said, I'm going to do a little bit of a report out on what we've got going on in District 11, but I really wanted to start with just a little bit of context of who am I, who is the community design team, what do we do, what does that mean, because I think it will help set up everyone's brain for what we're talking about as far as projects that we've got going on here. So I always like to start, oh, of course, there we go. My screen didn't want to advance. I always like to start with who the heck am I? So I have worked in bicycle and pedestrian advocacy and government for most of my career. Started out way back when in Washington, D.C. when I was a young whippersnapper, and eventually moved out to Colorado to work on the Safe Routes to School program. So that's near and dear to my heart, especially as it came down through federal funding back in the day. And a lot of municipalities and school districts have taken that on as a way to boost their bike and walk numbers, and also get our kids healthier and more active. So I spent the past 9-ish years working as a city council aide. So very familiar with Denver, very familiar with all of our agencies and city council. Worked primarily in District 7. Most of my time was with, I guess we now have to call him Director Clark, over at Parks and Recreation, but formerly Councilman Clark. Not sure how that works in the ranking of how you address people, which one's more important. And before that, worked for a little while in District 1. So super on the ground familiar with those areas. That being said, I've lived in District 9. I see Julie on here, one of my neighbors in Clayton. So worked in District 9, or lived in District 9 for almost 20 years now. So been here for a long time. Just a couple fun pictures on the right. That is my little boy, Jonas, who bikes to and from daycare with me every day. And then below that, I always like to show that us DOTI employees really do care. We get out and do stuff like plow the streets. So that's my snow plow. I get asked about it weekly by my 3-year-old because he thinks it belongs to us. So very cool and very exciting stuff. So a little bit about the community designers. So we are a team of 4 people, and I've got everyone's name down here at the bottom. You'll see us begin to cycle through to do all of these presentations over time. We are broken up geographically for the sake of just trying to focus on an area. So we have myself in Northeast, so I'm districts 8, 9, and 11. My colleague Molly is to the south of me, so she's 4, 5, and 6. We've got Greg, who has downtown, which we count as a double, so he gets 10 and 7 because there's so much going on in downtown. And then Rolando, who is our native Spanish speaker on our team, who covers the west side of Denver and also supports the rest of us when we need assistance there. One thing I didn't add to this is our team does work pretty heavily on our language access plan program for DOTI. So you've probably heard some about that in the past, but that is now something that we have created a system for and created a process for at DOTI. So based on how many folks speak different languages in different parts of the city, we've been working to fill both some city mandates and some federal mandates, because we are recipients of federal dollars to cover those language access programs. So on a day-to-day basis, our team serves as the liaison to our city council, specifically in the transportation implementation sphere. So shovels in the ground, final design for things, getting things done, which is great. I grew up in a construction household and I like to do things, not just talk about them. We're also the internal DOTI contact for many other projects going on within DOTI as far as how to communicate with the general public. So a great example would be our wastewater team is getting ready to kick off some projects and do some plans out in District 11 to replace some really old sewer lines and wastewater lines. And they reach out to me and say like, hey, who do we need to bring in on this? What are the conversations? How do we brief the council office, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just one quick example of that. Even though we're not in the wastewater team, we assist the wastewater team. We also work on area traffic engineer escalations. We love our traffic engineers and they are slammed all day, every day. So we try to work with community members who maybe aren't quite getting the answer that they're looking for or have some broader concerns outside of what our area engineers have the ability to make changes to. So we work on those escalations. Those typically come in via 311. And then last but not least, we coordinate between projects and programs and agencies. So it's a little bit of cat herding, hence my picture here, but I like to say sometimes that I get to be the busybody in DOTI for these 3 districts. So trying to figure out, hey, did you talk to Joe about that project? Because I think it's going to overlap with your project over here, and maybe you guys can figure something out or find ways to find some efficiencies there. So, whoops, let's see if I can get back one. So you may also see folks from DOTI out in some other community-facing roles. So we do have our planning team, our Office of Community and Business Engagement, which I see some of our friends from there on today. I see Christian in the Zoom room. We've got our solid waste team, like Tensley was talking about before. We have our parking team, street maintenance. They focus a lot on paving. Our operations teams who do signage and striping, and then wastewater. These are all teams that I work with on a daily basis, but they are kind of in a different chain of command from the community designers. We're there in an advisory role for them just to help them out, and they answer a ton of questions for us. So always good to know who's striping the streets. So to get to the construction project. So I broke these down into a few categories here. This first category are things that we have shovels in the ground on, that if you go to these areas today, you are going to see construction happening. So obviously we've got those Green Valley Ranch Boulevard medians going in. That's a big project, lots of action going on out there. Working to get that as complete and wrapped as possible by the beginning of the school year, because we want to make sure our friends over at EV Dennis don't have any more traffic nightmares than we have to create for them. We are also, as part of that project, installing the much anticipated Kittredge and Green Valley Ranch traffic signal. So that's been one that we've been pushing to try to get to the head of the pack for our RTD friends on the call. I know that even RTD has diverted around that intersection because it is too dangerous for a straight crossing for those RTD buses. So we should see that go in by the end of this calendar year. There should be some site work happening sooner than later. I've got a little illustration here of the Montbello Stormwater Improvement Project. So that may look to some like it's part of the 56th Avenue project. If you're cruising on 56th down the Greenway or down the road or along the Arsenal there, you may still see all of that construction happening at Uvalde. That's technically not part of the 56th Avenue project, but it was happening in conjunction. And that is to create a closed channel. So lots of open channels out in Montbello. And I bring this one up specifically, even though it's in District 8 now, but it was previously in District 11. So I know there's a lot of interest in Montbello about this. So creating a closed channel with some amenities on top, a bike path, and a really great access point for folks wanting to get over to the Rocky Mountain National Arsenal by bike or by foot to recreate. So some really exciting work happening there. We're hoping that they begin to close out the underground work on that soon and get started on the pretty fun stuff on top. But know that that is ongoing and a big project that we're excited about. And last but not least, we're actively doing work at Maxwell Place and Akeson, doing that pedestrian improvement, safe routes to school as part of one of our bond projects. So that one, if you're out in that neck of the woods, you're going to see people with shovels in the ground. Let's see if my computer will advance. All right. So this is where it gets a little confusing, because we also in our team do construction design. So think about this as you're getting ready to remodel your house. You know you want 2 bedrooms, you know you want 2 bathrooms, you know you want a kitchen. Now we've got to draw the actual blueprints to get that going. We've figured out we've got money to build it. And we need to do those final designs to get that out to construction. So the implementation team also does this. So these are items that if you go out and you look along Peoria, you're not going to see folks with shovels in the ground. You're not going to see barricades and equipment. But back at the office, we've got a team working hard and working with a consultant to finalize those construction plans, make sure that we know everything like where are the utilities under the ground and do we need to acquire any real estate, or what do we need to do to make sure that we aren't negatively impacting residents and businesses along there. So this list, these are things that I would say are in the hopper and about to happen. So we'll probably see some construction on many of these in the next year and a half. So Peoria Multimodal, that's one of our final outstanding bond projects, and that provides sidewalks along Peoria in the section where there are asphalt, quote unquote, sidewalks on the east side of Peoria, behind those residential houses that simply aren't up to ADA standard, et cetera, along with some other Vision Zero related improvements. Dunkirk and 53rd, we're going to be doing some pedestrian improvements. Same with Bowling and Stoll. The intersection at 56th and Ireland, we're going to be putting in that signal. Same with Tower and Elmendorf. We are working on a North Chambers Road safety audit. So we're also going to be doing this on Tower Road as well in the nearish future, but really getting out and finding those low-hanging fruit and figuring out things we can do to make improvements to those roads. And then last but not least, another smaller bond project, but the Ford Elementary School intersection improvements. And you heard it here first, but that might be expanding a little bit. We may for once have money to do more than we thought we could do in that area. So we may be getting some extra fun stuff in around 53rd, along 53rd near Chambers. So like I mentioned before, we do have our plan team, which is separate from our implementation team, but there are a handful of other projects going on that you may see folks out and about talking about. So we're working on our Denver Moves Bikes update. We've got the folks over at Montbello Organizing Committee, in conjunction with some folks over in Park Hill, have received a grant from Dr. Cog to work on their visioning for the Montbello Loop, and try to find some paths to construction. So figuring out what's the shortest way to get from this idea to getting some things on the ground for folks. You'll also hear and see a lot about our safe routes to school teams. We do have a system by which we go through and look at all the schools in Denver over time. We've broken them out into a series of tiers, and you may have heard from John Johnson, my colleague, on that in the past. But especially in District 11, there are a number of schools that fall into our categories for earlier intervention. And so a lot of schools are getting looked at up in District 11. And then you'll hear a lot out and about our Vision Zero program, which is a variety of things ranging from a rapid response team when we do have a fatality or a serious body injury on one of our streets, and what caused it, and how do we do what we can to prevent that from happening again in the future, to broader analysis of crashes on our roadways, different corridors that are high injury networks. So you'll see some projects coming through the pipelines about those areas as we move through the next few years. So, and Tinsley, I'll get to you in just a minute. I'm going to cruise through these last couple slides and then I'll grab you. So other things you might see out there, and I was just talking to some folks about this today. I even get confused sometimes, and I'm that crazy person who stops people on the street and asks them who they're with. But there's a ton of construction always happening on our urban streets, maintenance crews, sign crews, utility work, private construction happening out there. So I always encourage folks, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you see something happening in your community and you wonder what the heck is going on. I'll either point you towards the community designer for your area who may be able to help you out a little bit more, or give you some resources. There's some great things on Excel's website, on Denver Water's website, to give you an idea of what might be happening in your neighborhood. But know that all of these folks we coordinate with, we're on weekly meetings to do utility coordination and do our darndest to make sure that we don't pave a really nice street, put in a really nice new facility, and then Denver Water comes in and digs it up and puts a new water line, et cetera, et cetera. So we're always on the horn with them, always working with them in conjunction with our projects, also trying to save taxpayer dollars. If we're going to open up the street to rebuild it, let's let Denver Water get in there and do the work they need to do, and Excel get in there and do the work they need to do, so that there's a bright, shiny new street with all the great utilities underneath it, and we don't have to dig it up again anytime soon. So that is my presentation in a nutshell. I saw Tinsley's hand up, and since Tinsley's our District 11 rep, we definitely should give her a first stab here at questions.
When I saw, it's funny, when I saw you on the meeting, I took notes and stuff. So now it shouldn't be too confusing for anybody when I'm talking, because I ramble. So
no worries.
Fast. All right. My first question is, and I think, you know, with the presentation with Amy, if she ends up hopping on, it kind of is braided into this. One thing that Stacy has alerted me and other District 11 community members is that 56th and Tower Road is now the worst and most unsafe intersection in Denver. And while I'm very excited that you guys are actually doing a pilot for the Federal and Alameda, I just wanted to know kind of what your guys's or what your team's thought process was in relation, and why did that pilot not either one, be spread out to a couple different areas of the city, or I mean, kind of what was your reasoning more behind the Federal and Alameda? Were they kind of like the worst intersection first, or like, I would like to kind of wrap around your head.
Nick, I see you come back on, because I don't think I can answer that question from a prioritization perspective.
No problem.
Yes.
I think it will. I'll just get. But the other questions that I had were mostly about the like the Elmendorf. We've talked about that plenty of times, where there's definitely funding for it, but the issues come with the contractors and other processes that you have to kind of implement before you get to that point. And, you know, community members have been screaming for 5, 6, 7 years, in some cases, for some of these things to happen. And I am happy to see that they're on the list. But I think that my question more comes along with how are we able to speed some of these processes up even more? And I know you probably get this question all the time, but also not only that side of DOTI, I would also say even the things like the procurement process. You know, everything's new out here. Everything's still in development. There's still lots to develop and lots of planning to be planned. But I think the issue with D11 is we're really happy that these things are coming and that it's becoming more transparent. But because there's so much growth in terms of like the apartments and in terms of traffic, I kind of want to kind of put a feeler out there based on the information that you gave. What other things can we look at as an advisory board, but also, you know, just as DOTI itself, to move some of these projects a little bit quicker, because we are expected to grow 5 times more in the next 5 years. And it's concerning that still, Ellendorf has been in conversation for 3-4 years now, at least since I've been here, and it's still going to be another year and a half. And I'm not saying we're impatient, but it does take a lot to get to point A to point B.
I totally hear you there. And here's what I will say is putting in a traffic signal is not as simple as it seems. It is something that takes a lot of time and a lot of work. These projects, I don't know how we could speed them up, to be perfectly honest. Maybe if we had more money, but then we need human beings to do the work and get them through the process. So it's a balancing act there. I'm sure that Nick remembers back when I was in District 7, us harping on getting a 5th and Broadway and Lincoln signal in for the longest time. And it just took forever. These projects take forever because we have to procure items. We have to get contractors on board. My biggest request, honestly, would be that this board supports, any upcoming bond issuances and things like that, because that's really how we get most of this work done, and that gets us the money that we need. But as far as speeding the process up, the more I learn about the process, the more I think, holy crap, we got that done in 6 years, which isn't super promising, but it is the reality.
Yeah, and I think that's we at the very, very beginning of the meeting, we did talk about that in order to have pretty much a community meeting or community conversation, there would need to be a stack of things to talk about, not just like, one little small issue. And I think that basically what you said and the information you give me, that's really what D11 wants to hear from everyone, is from DOTI, is, what is that process? Why does it take so long? And kind of answer, and maybe this is something that could be as simple as just going on the website along with that, all the transparency tools that you guys have just made. But I'm just thinking through, like, if you're not on the advisory board, you're not going to know why Elmendorf has taken 7 years. You know what I'm saying? And no matter how you speak it out loud to them, at different events and things, it's easier to see it written down, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I will put one plug out there, and this is totally out of my lane, but I'm putting this plug out there because I find it thoroughly amusing. If you ever get a chance, of all social media presences, the Utah Department of Transportation has amazing social media. And they have a whole series of why do we do that and what the heck is going on. And these are all things that I love to explain to people here at DOTI when I can, and would love to see us do more of. But I encourage you to take a peek at that. And Nick, if you haven't seen it, it'll blow your mind and make you double over with laughter and be like, how is Utah cooler than we are? So definitely worth looking at. But, one of the things I look at my job as is a science communicator, and, the science that we're doing with traffic engineering, project management, construction is complicated. I don't claim to understand all of it, but I work with a lot of really smart people. And so the more we can get that message out, the better. So I think that's some great feedback, and I'll definitely take that back to my team. And as we continue to have conversations with Nancy, over in our comms team and stuff like that, I think these are things that are on my mind and that I send random messages to Nancy on, but it'll be some good backup to know that we get that feedback from you guys as well.
And the last thing, and I'll just leave it to everybody else to ask questions. But my last question, and this has been from feedback, and I'm sure you know this because you've also kind of dipped in DPR and things like that. But one definite kind of glaring subject that it has been a more of a hurdle for them is that procurement process for the parks, because we're not seeing any of these, planned parks even getting really started on them. And even like the Telluride and, the Walden area park has been planning, and pretty much now it's time for outreach this year, but we still haven't even gotten like any of the solidified plans or anything like that because of the procurement process has been so lengthy. So maybe just kind of working on that specifically, or kind of giving that feedback out specifically for D11 would be great. But other than that, I'll leave it to everybody else to ask questions.
Awesome. And just a reminder to be a little extra patient with us this year, because we technically didn't get to start our budget until several months and into the budget season this year. So everything, great big pause button was hit for a long time, but everyone is running double time over at DOTI, and I'm sure over at Parks to get caught up. I did see Alan, I'll let you go next, and then Jake.
Maggie, thanks so much for coming. I'm so inspired to see that you're using active transportation to get your kiddo around, and that you come from the safe routes to school background. So that's really, really fun to me. My question was, I've heard from others that sometimes engaging the community in far northeast Denver and really getting the community input to make sure that everyone is being heard and such can be challenging. What are you all doing with your partners to really try to get sincere community input when you have these projects that are going on?
Yeah, for sure. We have tried our best. Unfortunately, we also have our team over at OCBE working with us on these kinds of things. But, my biggest push for outreach has always been meeting people where they're at. I am a mother of a 3-year-old. If you ask me to come to a community meeting at 6:30 on a Tuesday night, you've got an ice cube's chance in hell of getting me there. But if you come to the splash pad on a Saturday when it's nice and I've got my kid out there playing, and you want to ask me some questions and have me write some stuff down on a map or do a survey, I've always thought that that is a much more proactive way for us to get out there. So we try to partner as much as we can with community organizations, council districts, et cetera, to get out there to events. Some of our most popular events have been things like the backpack giveaway that happens in Montbello every year, getting out to the District 11 open house night at EV Dennis every winter, those kinds of things. And then as we work on project specific stuff, really embedding ourselves with those individual neighborhoods. I know this sounds corny, but my favorite current tool is actually our plastic signs that we put out on corridors before we have public meetings. It sounds like so stupid simple, right? That having a sign up helps people, but maybe you don't live in that area. So if we mail something to you, you're not going to get information about that. Maybe your ex-husband and your kids live over there. So every once in a while, so once a week, you're taking your kids back to your ex's house and dropping them off. And you say, hey, I have a lot of questions about this corridor. I'd love to be part of this planning process. So we've been doing a lot more of that. We've been including that in every single one of our scopes when we go out to contractors to do public outreach. And for the record, I personally take them all and get them recycled because I do not want to create more plastic in this world. So I round them all up. I have about 1 million at my desk right now. Mike from the Vision Zero team can contest to that or can agree to that. I collect them and take them out to Arvada to recyclability. If you've never been there, great. But those tactics have been really good for us. So getting to people where they're at and then working on making sure that we're hitting not just people who live in an area or work in an area or go to school in an area, but folks who are passing through those areas with signs that are easy to read, easy for them to get a QR code off of and get meeting information. And then one of the great things, we're doing it right now, coming out of the pandemic, is giving people the opportunity to do remote meetings when it's good for them, doing hybrid meetings when possible, and then always having these meetings available for people to watch after the fact. I would be a great candidate, right? Like I wouldn't go to that 6:30 meeting, but maybe at 9 o'clock, once I finally got my kid to bed and the dishes done, I can sit down and watch a meeting and see what happened and email the project manager. So those are really the overarching things that we do. But as a team, as a community design team, our job is to get creative. So any other ideas we're always open to. And I always love it when Tinsley helps me get the word out.
Thanks, Maggie.
No worries. Jake, you're up next.
All right. I'll try to be quick, Maggie, because I know we're pushing on time for you. But given that I don't live near the area, so I may be fishing a little bit, but given that this is the meeting we're talking about Montbello too, I was curious. I know we've heard a lot over maybe the past 2 years on our board about like things like the Montbello circulator, and we've I also have some familiarity that there's an e-bike library. I don't believe that's a city program, but is offered in that neighborhood. How how does coordination with those programs work? Is that through your office, or how does that look?
It's actually not. So there's a couple of things going on. If you're looking at the e-bike library, that's the Montbello Organizing Committee, an awesome group. They're building the Fresh Low Hub, which is housing and groceries and all the things that folks are needing in Central Montbello there. That was actually in conjunction with CASR, so with the climate team over in their agency. So it was primarily a CASR project. They were able to fund a lot of those e-bikes to put into that library. When you talk about the circulator, I assume you're talking about the Montbello Connector, which are the smaller vehicles that are traveling around and connecting people from their door to whether it's light rail or bus lines or the A line or something like that. That is something that DOTI helps fund. We run that funding through a nonprofit called Northeast Transportation something. It's an S, NETC, C. I'm not sure. Connections. Thank you, Christian. Appreciate it. Always there for an assist. And so that is something that runs through DOTI. We provide them some funding. I believe Dr. Cog and some other grant providers also provide them with some funding, but that's executed through a nonprofit, and something that we hope will continue because it's been incredibly successful, and maybe even expand it one of these days. I know I'm in the pocket of places where the A line came in and a lot of bus routes were moved and eliminated. And we're kind of in a little bit of a lurch with accessing some places because of missing sidewalks, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really just great to see projects, creative solutions like that coming to life and working, getting people places.
Awesome. Thank you, Maggie.
Yes, and Jamie, you are right. RTD does also provide dollars for that. All right. Any other questions for me? Also feel free, if you have a general question about the community design team, what I'll go ahead and do is I will just put a quick list of our community designers, their email address, and the council districts that they cover in the chat so that you guys have it handy. But like I said, I think you'll see us cycling through, no pun intended, we're all bike riders. See us cycling through your meetings over the upcoming months, and hopefully getting you guys a little more in-depth information about what's going on in each of the districts.
Maggie, thank you again for meeting. And I just sent you and Nicholas both a message. I'm willing to totally help with any outreach type of thing that you guys want to do. I know everybody around here, so just let me know what you guys want to do and when and how, and we can make it happen. So just let me know.
Awesome. Thank you. I will now stop sharing my screen so we can see each other's faces a little bit better. But yeah, thanks again for having me. Always happy to chat about stuff. Don't be a stranger. And I see Julie's already looked at the u.coms. It's so funny. Bridgefest. I don't know if there's any Bluey watchers in the room, but it makes me think of Stumpfest. So it's very, very amusing. So anyway, I hope everyone has a great night. I'm going to sign off because the 3-year-old might walk in the door any minute and you don't want to be part of that. But thanks again for everything, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Maggie. Appreciate the courage on going first.
No worries. No worries. If you'd asked me in the 8th grade, I would have hidden someplace, but I've managed to come out of my shell since then.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Yeah, so we'll be doing those for other districts. Plan to see those over the coming months, but we're very excited to be able to focus in on district-specific levels. All right, I believe we might have all the directors needed for our federal and Alameda conversation.
Yes, sir. I think our executive director, Amy Ford, is here and is going to handle this item. So certainly we'll hand the floor over to her.
Hi, everyone. And I like to say that UDOT stole all their cool comms from CDOT when I was there. So I'm going to claim the coolness on the comms factor. But what I can't claim is being as cool as Maggie and like her full sleeve tattoos and stuff. So I'm way more boring when I come and talk to you all. And as you can tell, I'm sitting in my car. I had an event thing that I had to be at, and so I apologize that I'm a little late. But I drove away because it was out in in Kansas, in Aurora, and I needed to get to better connectivity so I could get onto this call. So apologize as I'm a little out of sync as a result there. But Nick, I don't know if you could share, or maybe Nanita could share the deck, but I am very excited to sit and chat with you guys today, and I know that Alan and team and others that we've been sitting and talking with you all, and you've heard me come in and chat with you guys over the last couple of times that I've visited with you about our priorities. And, I've had this conversation with you, with MBAC, with MPAC, with INC, with our bicycle advocates, with our safety advocates, and with others. And I wanted to come back around in talking with you, and Alan and Jake and others were, really thoughtful in asking me to sort of come back and chat with you. You knew that safety is priority number one. And as I've sat and chatted with you, as we come into this year and as we think about where we are and where we're going, that the priority is how do we save lives on Denver streets? And this is something that has been a long-lasting thing. We've talked about Vision Zero. We've had that conversation. And I think we all realize that as we established Vision Zero many number of years ago, and as we came back around in our action plan this last year, that we are going in the wrong direction when it comes to our safety and the fatalities and the people who are dying on our streets. And the challenge that I asked the team, and the challenge that I talked with you all about as we talked about priorities and focus and where we want to be, is really about how do we save lives on the streets. So if you could flip to the next slide, I wanted to walk you through the announcement that we just did with the mayor, but also do a bit of a deep dive into what that is and what that means. And then we can talk a little bit about this. And I'd love your thoughts and your input as we continue to move it forward. The last you and I talked, I told you all that the mayor and I sort of issued the challenge, if you will, to the team, which basically said this: if you were reducing crashes and if you were reducing fatalities, better yet, by 50% in 2 years, what would it take to do that? What would it take to create this urgency and this intentionality and this focus on how we would actually reduce fatalities? And really what the team did and spent, and as they thought about this and sort of deeply, and I've mentioned this and shared this to you, it's about speed. And so if you could flip to the next slide, when you really dig into it, what is happening is people are dying on our streets because of speed. And so what does that mean when we say that? It means that if a person is going 40 miles an hour on a street and they hit someone versus going 20 miles an hour on a street, that person is 8 times more likely to die because of that speed. And that's a really crash and harsh number to be able to say, crass, excuse me, but pun intended, I guess. But the challenge is, how do we reduce speed on these corridors? We know that when we look at our crashes and we look at our programs, and you're going to see some slides about that, that 85% of our crashes are speed related. And what you see in front of you is, as we talked about speed, how we address it, how we look at it, how we start thinking about how do I solve for speed and where do I solve for speed. We know not just the how, we also know the where. And I'm going to talk in more detail about these here in a minute, about what the speed program elements then are going to include. But before I do that, let me go to the next slide. And I'm just going to talk you through the big pictures of things, which I know that you all are aware of, but I just wanted to sort of highlight this again. So I'll let you flip to the next slide if you could. Okay, and one more as we go. All right. So you see here in front of you, obviously, our statistics. And I think these are things that you all are very familiar with and very aware of. But I just sort of want to highlight yet again those fatality crashes, which so substantially jumped in our 2020, 21, 22, 23 timeframe. A couple of things you noticed. We had the decrease in the COVID era. And as we came out of that into this, what we saw are people are driving more, people are biking more, people were walking more. And with all of that movement, what we were seeing was an increase in our fatalities. And we have stayed very steady now at that sort of 83 for the last couple of years. If you could flip to the next slide. You also see the deaths in how that means by mode. And so I wanted to highlight this because, when we talk about speed and when we start talking about the why, I want to understand sort of who we're trying to solve for. So people in cars are dying and those rates continue to go up, but then they've plateaued just a little bit. Our pedestrians continue to rise dramatically. And when we start thinking about how we address these fatalities and how we think about the speed component to them, that's some of what we're trying to solve for and some of those solutions that you saw in front of you. Next slide. And this is why. So what you have in front of you here is really looking at our traffic-related deaths, where they're happening around the cities, and how and where and why we focused in certain areas that we're going to be focusing on. And you see the number of 83%, and that's basically people who are going over a certain speed limit here. Hold on, I'm going to put on my glasses so I can read it, above 30 miles an hour as we go through. But you also see sort of the coordination and the coalescing, if you will, of certain corridors like Federal, like Alameda. And really along all of these corridors here that you see highlighted in the speed, they are all our high injury network corridors. So I mentioned to you, we know where these are happening. You can see in front of you literally where they are happening. If you can flip to the next slide. So I mentioned to you before our high injury network, and when we talk about sort of how we wanted to focus our time and our attention here over the next year, we really did want to zero in on those high injury networks, because the challenge was, how do you reduce it as quickly as you can, as impactfully as you can, here in a year or two or less? What would it take to do that? So this is not to discount, and as you see our high injury network, what you see is both tier 1 and tier 2 networks. And what that means is tier 1 networks are the ones where we know these are our highest injury networks. We have certain statistics and data that pulls them into that category. Tier 2 is sadly the ones that are on the watch list, so to speak. So they are corridors that are there that are really impactful for us. And then you also see some highlighted areas, which are our safety zone areas. So for instance, all of downtown is a high injury network. Broadway, Federal. There are some other corridors, Colfax, which are high injury networks for us that are almost safety zone areas where the entire thing. And so you see those blurred areas in there. But as we went into this program, if you flip to the next slide, what we wanted to do is we wanted to say, how would we deploy a series of measures, all layered one on top of each other? In doing so, try to see if we could reduce crashes by up to 50%. What would it take to be able to do that? And I say crashes and fatalities. So as we did our analysis and we looked in, we basically identified both Federal and Alameda as our primary corridors that we wanted to sit and we wanted to focus on. Now, Colfax, Broadway, and some of the others are equally corridors that we have on our list, but we pulled Colfax off the list for right now, in as much because we have the Colfax BRT project moving already, and that will undergo construction here soon. We have West Colfax project moving. So we actually wanted to hit some corridors where we could have some impact across the board. So what you see that we wanted to do is we wanted to focus in on certain areas on these corridors and layer in a variety of different strategies that we could deploy quickly, rapidly, and at low cost. So when I was asked, when we talk about this, about each of these corridors is about $1 million, give or take, with these strategies. And what you'll notice is it's a combination of strategies that are engaged with our speed limits, speed feedback signs, how we think about signal timing, and a variety of things. And so I'm going to talk through them just really briefly. What you see off to the right on this slide is what we call a crash reduction factor. And you might be familiar that Federal Highway Administration and others and studies do analyses to say, hey, we think that maybe putting some of these in place could reduce crashes by X%. And as you look at that, you can see sort of the variety of approaches that we have here. Again, there's no one silver bullet that is going to solve all things. Obviously, infrastructure changes are significant and expensive, and they too have a very impactful approach to how we reduce crashes. But again, the goal of this as this pilot is fast, with intentionality, layered approach that we could deploy now and quickly. So the first is really how we think about saturating our corridors with speed limit signs and speed feedback signs. And it does work, actually. When you are seeing those reflective speed feedback signs and they're telling you your speed, for instance, you do slow down. We also want to think about a directed marketing campaign, and it's one that we already had dollars for, that we actually are moving into this, and we're thinking strategically about how we target it into those corridors and maybe even incentivize the slow driving. So we're working on some of that. We're also looking at our signals and our traffic signal timing. And you saw and heard us talk about this. We have some great examples, for instance, on West Colfax, for instance, between about to about Sheridan, where we changed the signal light timing. We saw a reduction of our fatalities by up to 70% when we changed the signal timing to encourage people to go to speed limit. And I know that sounds simple and easy, but what it happened is as you start, it could be one of two things. It could be a bit of a green wave. In other words, if you drive the speed limit, you're going to hit the lights when you need to hit the lights. If you drive faster, you're going to hit the reds. But in simply doing that, we saw a significant reduction in fatalities along that corridor. So signal light retiming is something that is big and expensive for us to do, but you will see that on Federal and you'll see that on Alameda. We're also going to be looking at how we adjust the timing on our nighttime driving. And so specifically, it used to be sort of a flashing green to go. You and we all know that we have folks who are dragging, for instance, on Federal. We've had issues of speeding on Alameda. So how do we shift ourselves to a rest at red approach? And we also have the signals in the area that are dynamic enough that we can also, they will change as vehicles come in. But that's something that's under study right now by a lot of cities, and we're looking at shifting to that as well. We're also going to continue to expand, again, the pedestrian head starts, that leading pedestrian interval timing, if you see them on our traffic lights. And then we're also going to be talking about speed enforcement. And this is a conversation that actually we want to come back to you all and have a good conversation about, related to speed enforcement cameras, and specifically automated speed enforcement cameras. So two things that we're going to be looking at in the quarter. Number one, we're going to be working with DPD to surge our mobile speed vans into these corridors. We already know that we have an effect of upwards of 60% reduction in speed and travel in areas where those speed vans are deployed. And those are the vans that you see out that are staffed by a person who sits in them, and they catch you and they send you your photo identification, and then they send you your ticket if you've been speeding. But state legislation just last 2 years ago, and then it was just slightly amended in this year's legislative process, allows now for cities to deploy automated speed enforcement cameras. And we and you all and some of your advisory board members have put together white papers and others where we strongly believe that automated speed enforcement cameras can be a critical safety element to how we drive speed reduction, but also protect the people who are in those corridors. And you see here crash reduction factors that are significantly higher in some regards than some of the other categories. But I think that we believe that this is a program that we should think about, and how we pilot and how we think about that in these corridors. I bring this up because I want to frame it out for you that there is a lot to consider when we deploy an automated speed enforcement program. How we develop the program, how we think about the equity of deployment, how we look at sort of the collection, if you will, of the revenue. The state legislative process and the bill that it currently passed that permits this takes a lot of these considerations into play. How it caps the dollars, so it is not about a revenue grab, but instead is really focused on the safety elements, the agency who deploys it. There's a lot of things that we're having to work through as we would think about deploying a program like that. And we'd like to bring that actually to you all as we're sitting and developing that for your feedback, your input, your consideration in the public process as we go into how we would deploy this. So let me just sort of finish this up by a couple more slides. So if you could flip to the next slide, and then please, you guys, ask me questions as we go along. The speed program, if you will, is a portion, I guess I call it the top of the pyramid, if you will, on the overall programs that we have related to speed. And June's weighing in on some of the automated speed enforcement, so we'll come back to that point here in a minute. But I wanted to sort of add a note that there is more to go when we talk about safety. And so the SPEED program is a very targeted, very impactful goal of how do we reduce crashes by up to 50%. But on top of that, if you could flip to the next slide, I wanted to share many safety projects that we have moving across the board here in Denver. And so you see this sort of slide right now that sort of summarizes a lot of our safety programs. And then I'm going to talk a bit about the projects. But before I do that, Alan, I see you've raised your hand. So let me catch your question here first, and then I'll just sort of end this by talking about some of our other safety efforts.
Yeah, Director Ford, first of all, thank you. I think you heard tonight and I've heard elsewhere in community that people love this approach. And if anything else, I think folks want more of it. Right now, I know we have limited resources, but thank you this is what this board has been asking for years, is a more aggressive approach to safety. So thank you for your leadership on this. One thing you showed on statistics was you talked about when the fatality rate of crashes over 30 miles an hour, right? So much, living here in North Denver, so much of Federal Boulevard is 35. Have there been any considerations, especially in places like in front of CDOT headquarters, where you unfortunately see so many fatalities, to consider reducing that to 30 miles an hour, down from 35?
We are talking about it. And so we have actually had some conversations with CDOT where we are starting to explore that. They are open actually to speed reductions along that corridor. And so we don't have it in play quite yet, but we're looking at how we do that. In addition to that, we're also looking at there's some additional studies and things going on in addition to the speed layer that we're going to be putting in about 14th and Federal, as an example, which we all know is a notoriously, gosh, I was over at CDOT the other day and I watched just the craziest interaction of a guy on a scooter who'd wrecked, who came running around and doing a variety of things. And it was treacherous beyond belief. And so I'll move. I'm sorry. I was trying to do a call. I'll get out of the way of the trucks. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, folks. I tried to pull it over to do the call, and so I pulled over in the wrong spot. I'll move out. Thank you, sir. Sorry about that, you guys. Let me do this. I'm going to go off camera for 2 seconds, but I'm going to keep talking to you as we're on my phone. So we're looking at it, to be honest, and so we're working through that process. They too are actually doing some studies where we're looking at how we think about what we might be able to do and the corridor that lays on top of what we're looking at on the speed program. So our team and our traffic engineers and others are actually meeting with CDOT here in the next week or two to look at some additional strategies that we can be pulling into play along Federal. So that's the short answer, if you will, to what we're thinking about right now on Federal with speed. So
thank you.
We might get there. And then June, just to respond to your question really quickly, related to the mobile speed cameras, you're absolutely right on sort of in the general area. What we have actually seen with our statistics with the mobile speed vans is actually even a higher reduction in speed. And that 60% number that I was sharing is something that's actually our personal experience with it right now. Okay. All right. I have moved. I pulled across into a closed driveway that I thought I was sitting at, and I was safe, but I was not. I just got shooed off. So sorry about that. I wanted to be safe. Jamie, you've got your hand up, and then I'll go to the last slide here.
I think Julie was first.
Oh, great. Sorry about that. Julie, go ahead. Didn't see your hand there.
No problem. I was just curious. I clicked on the link that I think Alan put about the map and the dashboard of, and I was wondering, you had like in a car on those stand-up scooters, do you track people in wheelchairs getting hit? And do you track the damage to wheelchairs as well as damage to bodies?
You know, actually, Julie, that is a really good question. I don't know. Nick, do you know? Let me go and double check that. I don't know, actually.
And if Rolf happens to know.
Yeah, is Rolf on? Oh, yeah. Oh, great. Rolf, that's perfect.
Evening. Yeah. I'd say working with DPD, people in wheelchairs are counted as pedestrians. Do not think that they differentiate. Now, in their notes, they may detail that out, but that's, from what I understand, not necessarily a field that's separate. I
know in terms of traffic stuff, we are pedestrians, like, in terms of like being able to use the sidewalk and all of that. But I noticed that like scooters that should not be pedestrians, but also decide that they can use the sidewalk freely, were counted separate. So I was just curious about that, and because it is a significant amount of damage. And so often what happens, the reason I'm asking is, so someone might get their chair totaled, but they don't have a serious bodily injury. Like it's not like it might just be bumps and bruises, but then because they don't have their chair, they end up in bed, and that ends up often like millions of like pressure sores, like really serious things. So it's not like, I don't know that anyone's gonna track that it was from the fact that they got hit by a car and their wheelchair got hurt, like especially with power chairs, the chair's often gonna get hurt before the person, or the hurt that the person gets might not, if it's not, again, if they're 40 miles an hour, maybe, but even at 20. So I was just curious about that because, and a lot of that I hope will get fixed when the sidewalk program, because so often we have to use the street because we can't use the sidewalk. So hopefully as the sidewalks get better, we'll be forced to use the street less. But that was just my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good point. We'll flag that. And Nick, if you can just flip to the last slide, but then I wanted to go to Director Lewis. Jamie.
Yeah, on the first tool that you talked about was saturating the corridor with new speed signs.
Yes.
And I haven't driven in years, but I would find that that's almost kind of like white noise. I don't think people really pay attention to them because they pass them so many times. Is there any way of changing the color or putting a reflective trim or something on it to get their attention? Because I feel like if you just change the number on it, they're not going to realize that it's changed.
You bring up a valid point, and in fact, our city traffic engineer talked about exactly that when we were sitting and talking with council about this. And yes, you do get sort of sign blindness after a little while. And so, part of what we're looking at is, mobile. Do we change? Do we move the locations of signage, that kind of thing, to continue to keep it fresh? And I know that's a weird statement, but you're exactly right with that reason. And so that's some of what we're going to be looking at. We're very cognizant that actually can be a part of some of this. So yes. Tinsley, you've got your hand up. And then Nick, if you can flip to your last slide. As you ask your question, Tinsley, I wanted to just sort of show you guys one real quick thing as we go into that. The map you saw before sort of shows the overlay of those high injury networks that I was bringing up to you, but then also the overlay of the projects that we all talked about in the Denver Moves Everyone program and our 6-year CIP, our capital improvement program, how we are orienting and overlaying those projects over those safety corridors as well. So that's some of the layers that you're seeing on this. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of these individual projects. But Tinsley.
Well, you answered just part of my question, Amy, right there. So, but I had two kind of similar questions. The first is, if this pilot works, how are you guys going to think creatively in terms of pulling funding from like safe routes to schools to increase better, better outcomes, especially in these much larger intersections that it takes a really long time to get across, that are in close proximity to schools, but also, what other creative funding are you guys working on if this whole pilot with all these tiers really do effectively work for Denver? What is the next steps once you know it works, and once you know what else you need to do besides policies and lobbies and things like that?
That's an excellent question. And so twofold, let me just sort of say, the intent with the pilots is to assess them, to see them, to study them, to understand sort of how effective we think these are. If they are effective, we would like to continue to roll them out to the rest of the 35 high injury networks. Now, recognize that even in me just saying that, and you hear that I'm talking about $1 million a corridor, you can do the math on that, right? So a couple of things that we have done is we have actually put in for and applied for a Safe Streets for All. You hear the acronym SS4A, which is a large grant that's coming out of the feds with the recently, the bill or the Infrastructure Act. We actually put in for a $20 million grant program with that to implement this citywide. And it would be approximately 100 intersections and corridors along with our downtown safety area to be able to implement a series of these speed efforts along with some other improvements and infrastructure improvements and such. Should we not receive that grant, but we're excited and hopeful we'll find out some more here later in the fall, we will immediately reapply for a deployment grant for an implementation pilot on the downtown corridor, which is another $6 to $7 million. Why do I say all of that? Because part of how we look at our budgets is we absolutely will be looking at allocating those budgets. What you see in front of you are how we take our capital projects and budgets, and the list that you have in front of you on these different projects are a source of different funds, from things like Safe Routes to Schools to our SRF, which is our, our safety revenue fund, if you will. Other capital projects that are doing improvements, transit dollars, sidewalk dollars, Safe Routes to Schools dollars, as I mentioned before, and sort of compile together on the two priorities that we really think are important when it comes to safety. So there's speed. It's how do we make our better roads? How do we create better opportunities for rides? In other words, how do we continue to move people to transit and to create mobility options? Because as you may not have seen in the stats, but I will just sort of say it, 0 people have died on Denver streets when they are riding on transit. And then how do we enhance protection for pedestrians and cyclists? And that is, and for people who roll. That is absolutely at the core of how we address safety as a whole. So you're going to see a series of dollars. Obviously, you guys went through the exercise with us where we talked about how we allocate our limited funds and spread our peanut butter. But I wanted to sort of show you sort of the speed program on top of the safety investments that we're making, and then how we split that out, and then how we infuse new dollars like grants and otherwise to help us continue to grow. So no perfect answer on that, Tinsley, to be honest, because we would to do more, as you well know, but that's what our approach is right now.
And Amy, I truly commend you and your team. I know over the past few weeks, especially, there's been some heat about this, and I'm really proud of you guys for standing up and getting this together so quickly and ways to implement this so quickly. So thank you guys so much for listening to community. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tinsley. Appreciate that. Jake, you might have had your hand up next, and then June, you've got your hand up. And June, we will work to try to get you some of the stats and what we're seeing on our mobile. And Rolf, help truth tech me if I misquoted that on our mobile vans. Make sure that I'm staying honest about where we are with our numbers on our crash reduction. So, but Jake, I think you had your hand up next, and then Julie, thanks for your comment about that transit figure, because it's absolutely true. And correct, it is not about the concepts of how people perceive their riding on RTD right now.
Awesome, thank you, Director Ford. This was so exciting to see this come out. I didn't really know the scope of this, but I think this is something that I've heard advocates wanting for 10, 12, 15 years. And it was a really big deal. I think it acknowledged the fact that we do not have unlimited resources, but still asked the question of what can we do? And that is just such a phenomenal culture change. And I really, really want to thank the team for doing that. And I mean, I've never Googled so fast what Rest on Red was. I'm a policy nerd, and that one like totally surprised me. I'd never heard of that. But I do think that I'm really, really excited about this program. I like think that it is, everyone's going to want more, but I think the question is with the resources we have, what can we do? And I think you guys got that formula really right. And so I guess more than anything, this is a comment that is just a phenomenal culture change. And I love to see it. I want to see it more. I want to see it every day.
So do we. And I'll tell you the things that we didn't talk about that we're also trying. And, everything was on the table as we start thinking about this. And so another example of a quick deployment, and you're going to see us actually piloting it on Evans before we might do it on Federal and others, is we talked about the idea of how do we slow those folks down? How do we slow the drag racers? Concepts like speed tables and others are things that are in the toolbox, if you will, but we're actually testing out what we call transverse rumble strips. And many of you have seen them, you've driven over them in rural highway situations where you're coming along on a highway and you come into an intersection and they ask to slow you down before you come to a stop sign. We're testing that out. Actually, our team went and 3D and created and printed them to spec and 3D printed them, and we're actually testing them out right now on Evans. I think they're in place. If not, they will be here in the next few weeks. So again, just trying to think about quick, fast solutions that allow us to deploy and allow us to move and literally put everything on the table about how we try to solve for these challenges. So, but June, you've got your hand up. And as you guys are aware, June joined us at the press conference to also speak briefly to talk about safety. But June, go ahead.
I will try to keep my questions brief. Also, I do pass over Evans every single week as I go play some D&D down there. So I will be on the lookout for those rumble strips to see sort of
Keep on the lookout. They're going to be in the area. They're right around campus as we are trying to bring people between, basically between university as we go to about Downing or so, but it's really right in the campus area there.
Yeah, excellent test area to test that intervention out. Two very quick items. What is the implementation timeline of this first sort of surge? And second, CDOT now has required declining fatality targets within state law. Have you approached CDOT about using some of their funds on those state highways within Denver that are really dangerous, and essentially saying like, hey, putting these interventions in Denver, it'll help you reach your statewide targets easier, and we'll also get maybe more of those interventions rolled out in our community in a quicker fashion. Maybe just another potential pot of money for Denver to reach into.
That's a really great concept. And so short answer on the deployment rollout is what you're going to see us going is about over the next 6 to 9 months or so, you're going to be able, Jake, I agree. I love other people's money too. I'm ready and willing to spend it. So over this next 6 to 9 months, you're going to see us. We've already actually started work on some of the signage and others. Alameda is moving with some of it. The longest lead will be the pilot, if you will, on the automated speed cameras, because we've got work to do on getting the program up and going and collaboration with technology partners and others. And the signal light timing as we get that going, those are the longest lead items. So next 6 to 9 months is our hope. You'll see it moving into, mid next year. And we would like to be able to start our evaluations of it, come next year, summerish, a year from now or so. So that's the timing that we're looking at. And we'll keep you all apprised. That's how we go with that. In regards to back to CDOT and asking about their money and their targets, that's some of the goal of our next meetings. We had a large brainstorming meeting with them about a month and a half ago. We're doing some follow-up on that now. And we already do have CDOT dollars deployed in some of these corridors too. For instance, safety grant program that helped us work on our West Colfax work, which you actually see here listed in front of you, which took many of the changes that we did on West Colfax and are now pulling them even further through Denver. And we had a groundbreaking of that particular project here about a month or so ago. HSIP, which is a program called the Highway Safety Improvement Program. And those are federal dollars that also do pass through into our local streets. But yeah, I think that we're going to continue to have some conversations with them about joint deployments, if you will, especially focus areas like federal. Joe, I think you had your hand up next, and then Andy.
Joe, you're on mute.
Oh, good. I thought it was just me. I was like, oh, am I hitting something wrong?
No, I'm not. Yeah, I raised my hand,
Perfect.
Lowered it, but that doesn't unmute me. So anyway, well, thank you for your fine presentation. It's very clear. And I think you're going in the right direction, to use some of the things that we all want to go in. And I just am impressed the way you've organized it and all that. But I just have a question. Is this 50% realistic? I mean, I'm going to go back to my neighborhood and all that. It seems like in the past, whatever, 4 or 5 years, we've gotten 0% or less.
Right.
And somehow in 2 years, and we know putting a traffic light in takes a heck of a long time. And I'm sure doing anything beyond that with more radar photo enforcement, and just because you swarm vans, there aren't enough vans and all that. Is it realistic? And then the other thing is, how much are we dealing with the psychological aspects of this? Because it seems like everybody has a license to speed. If you go on any of these routes, and if you're going 25 in a 25-mile zone, everybody's passing you and doing that. Or if I'm riding my bike, as soon as people get past me, they just zoom by at least double the speed limit. So how do we kind of handle all of that other than just passing tickets or having their cars bump them too much? Are there any other issues or any other ways to kind of get people just to think that if they're going too fast in too big of a car to actually be able to accomplish vision zero?
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, those are good questions. So let me tackle the 50% one. Is it realistic first? We have to try. And Joe, if we shoot for 50% and I get 40%, then that's 40% improvement and the lives that we have saved on our roads. And I think that setting ambitious targets and ambitious goals and forcing, if you will, the exercise and the engagement to say, what if, how do we, why shouldn't we, and how do we really push? It allows us to expand our imagination, to think broadly and deeply. And this builds on the great work that Rolf and team have already been doing with our action plan, accelerates it, intensifies it, and tries to layer it in a way that sort of gets to that. So we will see. We could very well have a situation where I'm out in the press later saying, golly, Amy, you guys didn't hit 50 with this goal. And then we're going to retrack and we're going to retread and we're going to come back and see what else we can do. The things that we can do and manage under our control. We have colleagues also. I see Jill Locantori is on the call as well. And I think that the other thing that we have about the psychological piece of this, let me sort of answer that. And team, feel free to jump in, or Rolf or others if you wanted to add to the 50%. But we have a couple of things. Number one, we know that these corridors are built and designed in a way that encourage people to speed. We know that. We know that because of the nature of it, the wide road of it, the very nature of the road encourages people to go faster than what that speed limit is. So there's work that we have to do on an infrastructure side. We also recognize that the infrastructure changes, how we create a complete streets environment, how do we create an environment that doesn't encourage people to think of it as a raceway, is something that we also are focused on as we think about our complete streets designs and how we weave those in. How do we think about roadways? I'll use, since I have this list in front of you, York and Josephine is a perfect example of a project where we are going to be looking at how we do that. That was a corridor that was designed in a sense for people to facilitate speeding. And consequently, we had people speeding. We had a high number of crashes. It's a serious safety corridor. Interestingly, as we could reconfigure that street, as we narrow it, we are adding bicycle protection. We are adding parking. We are creating pedestrian protection. It also narrows the street in a way that we believe strongly will reduce speeds, reduce crashes, enhance protection for all modes as they travel that corridor. Those are things that we are doing. We are also planning, and it takes some time and some effort and some money to be able to do that. But the second piece on the psychological elements of it is not only is there the how we sort of design a system that encourages people to think about how they drive and how they are effectively managing that roadway, but as the mayor so eloquently put during the press conference, it's also a level of accountability. And this is where elements like enforcement and speed enforcement come in. And we believe, again, the gift that has been handed to us to allow us to, for instance, do automated speed enforcement, knowing that we have very limited resources with our police partners and others in their capacity to enforce on these corridors. We believe that we are asking everyone to be a partner in how they use these roadways and how they think about each other and their safety. But there are going to be times when they break the rules. We have all sped. We are all doing things that we know that we shouldn't be doing. And so how we're held accountable for being good neighbors and being good drivers and being good partners on these roadways is important. And that's why the enforcement part is a part of the solution as well. Because not only do we want to encourage the culture, we're going to also enforce and hold people accountable to that culture. Yeah, go ahead. Did you have a follow-up there, or
no,
Andy?
I just wanted to thank you.
Okay, yeah, and Andy, I think you had a last question, maybe.
Yeah, and it actually might tie into Joe's there a bit. I look at the list. I'm really excited about all of them. I generally understand what all of them mean. The one that is pretty, I think, opaque to me is what the marketing piece is. Can you talk about what that, even some generalities of what that might look like?
I'm brainstorming that right now with our team and with our marketing team. So you guys probably know back history of mine. So I'm a long time, I obviously was with the Colorado Department of Transportation. I had communications under me. I also was responsible for the millions of dollars that we received from the National Highway Safety Transportation Administration to do advertising and safety campaigns and programs. So you see them all over the state, click it or ticket, and all this kind of stuff. What I was very focused on then was very action-oriented campaigns. You drive by a billboard and it says, "Slow down, Amy," and you look at it and go, whatever, which is fine. And then that's money spent that goes down the drain to advertise. That raises awareness. Now, awareness is incredibly important. and how we sort of layer heavy awareness in with very real things and actionable on the roadways, such as our signal timing or the enforcement and others. Those all are part of a piece of a pie and how you create these layers of safety. But I am actually interested in challenging our group and our team to think a bit creatively about how we maybe incentivize it in good behavior. For instance, when I was at CDOT, I'll just use this as an example. You may not know this, but we were running programs on how people would use breathalyzers before they would get in cars. Colorado at one point was the highest used state in the country for breathalyzers before people would drive. And that to me is impactful about how I would try to reduce DUIs as an example. So I use that as an example. You all have heard me make comments and observations like, what if I could incentivize you to drive the speed limit? What if I could, and with cameras, perhaps I could see this, people opt into a program where I would then, and I'd love you guys' creativity on this, where if I saw that you were driving the speed limit, you're an opt-in, you have a lottery chance of winning $100 a day, and I pay you to drive safely. I use that as an example because how could I perhaps take marketing dollars or otherwise and think about incentive programs or otherwise that may encourage people to look at that culture change, Joe, back to what you were talking about behaviorally, and think differently about how they drive these corridors. So I don't know if I can do that without some sort of visual evidence. And so I've been trying to think about that on the speed camera side. But that is what we're challenging our team and our marketing. And it's small dollars that we have available. But if you all have some brilliant and great ideas on incentive programs, I'd love to hear some of your creative thoughts. As I just sort of monitor the chat as we're talking, I know that June has sort of weighed in on where council is with speed cameras. And we did have Council President Torres there with us also at the press conference, who spoke very strongly in favor of the program, as well as elements like the speed enforcement cameras. So, but we've still got work to do on how we put all that together, but we're excited about where we might be able to take it. But Andy, help me come up with some brilliant incentive programs. Maybe we can get there. Well, you guys, thank you. And sorry you got to listen to me parking clearly in the wrong spot and then getting shooed along as we're doing this call. But I'm really glad that I could join you and sit and talk a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish here. And we'd love to come back to you. We want to come back with our speed program and the enforcement side. Get your thoughts and feedback, because there will be a lot of work we want to do with the community on that too, about how we educate and inform about how we would be doing a program like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Director Ford. This was awesome. I know so many of us really enjoyed this chat. Awesome.
Fabulous.
And then moving on to our next topic, June budget.
All right. Thank you so much. And Jake, I just want to quickly check, how much time do I have to talk about this?
We had such a good conversation, but unfortunately it took some time. Why can I give you 10 minutes?
Sure. Okay. So this was a conversation that was brought up after a few, I believe it was last month or the month before, but we approved a budget letter to send to DOTI before they refined their budget and sent it off to the mayor's office. And there was discussion, especially from Eileen, about essentially taking that letter, and that wasn't enough, right? Basically, if we stick just within the realm of DOTI's budget alone, we're never going to get DOTI to fulfill the critical goals that we're here to help support DOTI fulfill. So we got to talking, and Jake, Eileen, and myself have worked on the beginnings of a letter draft that is meant for the mayor's eyes and the mayor's team. The objective there is to essentially give over a framing document to the mayor, advocating for an increased DOTI budget generally, and advocating that the mayor's office should think more transformatively about transportation budgeting in the future. So it's in a very rough state right now. I'm going to quickly run over some of the ideas that we had. Broadly, it's meant to be and let me actually see, yeah, anyone, I'll send this off to the panelists so you can sort of see this. Host and panelists, okay. So you all should be able to see that letter. Essentially, what we're aiming to do with this is to have this be, and it's in a very rough shape right now, which is why we're not ready to vote on it at this meeting. But broadly, it was to sort of tie together the mayor's transition goals and the mayor's vibrant Denver goals alongside an increase in DOTI's overall budget, with a lot of ideas to sort of spark the imagination to make the budget as strong as possible coming out of the mayor's process. So some of the ideas, so of course, we've got our 5 goals: safety, multimodal transportation, climate access, and then built for success. On the ones there that have actual metrics, we want to encourage the mayor to target specific large-scale projects in order to meet those metrics and really meet the moment on that, if that makes sense. So there were a lot of promises that he made during his transition that haven't so far showed up in the budget. So a few of the things that we wanted to really encourage on, first of all, is traffic safety. Thank goodness. I mean, this new speed program is fantastic. Hits on a lot of these points. It's on automated enforcement, reducing speed, adding other traffic calming elements. Some areas that are not part of the speed program that we want to encourage is adding additional focus on hiring right-of-way enforcement agents as both a potential revenue generation method, but also as a way to make sure that the city is making sure that people are held accountable, especially for like things like expired tags or for parking and not allowing our street sweepers to clean the streets. We really want to encourage, of course, a mode shift in our transportation system. Right now, the DOTI goals really have a strong focus on changing our commute mode share away from single occupancy vehicles. Currently, that mode share sits at 67%, at least as of the finishing of Denver Moves Everyone. The goal is to reduce that down to 50%, and that's going to require some significant investments in active transportation infrastructure and transit infrastructure. So some things we do recommend, in addition, is just paying for eco-passes for folks. One idea that we brought up is now that we have a lot of new state funding coming down for transit, in particular dedicated state funding for rail projects, we had an idea that, hey, maybe we see if Denver has the capacity to provide matching funds to finish the L line extension, to make sure that we connect 38th and Blake and basically better connect Rhino, 5 Point, and downtown together. And that wouldn't actually be a ton of money if you look at it in the grand scheme of things. In addition, there's a downtown bus plan, which Greater Denver Transit has been doing a lot of great work on. Of course, we've got all these new sidewalk funds coming in, which is going to be fantastic. And then for biking, we want to point to a city like Edmonton, which has really, really prioritized bike funding. So they have about 1 million person population, so a bit higher than Denver, about 20% higher, but they're investing about $33 million Canadian every single year into their protected bike lanes. So a significant chunk more than Denver is. They also have done a lot of automated enforcement up in Edmonton. We're also asking that he supports the full build out of the Denver Move Spikes map. And also, something that we want to include in this document is we want to make it be very, very informational and talk about our goals and compare Denver to a lot of our peer cities, both nationally and internationally. More of a focus on national peers, though, because, I mean, we really want Mayor Johnston to take a look at transportation as the necessary investment that it is, and to think, what are potential new sources for transportation funding, and whether or not there's budget allocations that currently exist in other departments which could be more efficiently spent in transportation. So I think that's where I'll keep it. We're sort of still broad and we're still building it out, but our hope is that this letter is a very strong, detailed framing document that can inform not just this year's budget, but inform the mayor's thinking as we go forward into future budget years and also potential future bond cycles. So that's sort of where that exists. If folks are interested in plugging in and giving more input and working on this, I'm hoping that we'll have it done by next month's budget meeting, or by next month's meeting of the board, so that we can get it off to the mayor before their budget is finalized. So again, this is still fairly rough, but wondering if anyone has any quick questions or input before we move on. Just wanted to provide that update.
If I can, June, just to help keep this moving, because I know we want to get it to the board as soon as possible. I'm hoping it's fair to potentially ask for comments from this group by Friday of this week. I think if I give you a deadline too much further away, I think we'll probably let it slide, but I'm hoping that by the end of the week, maybe people can drop in comments on what they think works or doesn't, just so that we can keep it moving, June. I know that we struggled with that with our initial board letter, was like last minute comments.
That's fair. Yeah. If folks can put in their comments, I'll be incorporating them, and I'm hoping to spend a lot of work on this and make this document very, very strong as a general resource. So especially if anyone has ideas for like more visionary, larger proposals that might fit into this letter specifically, please insert those comments or thoughts on like priorities, things that we're missing so far, or just like facts and figures you want included, all that sort of stuff I would love to have. Yep, happy to just take comments and leave it there.
Right. I'm not seeing any, so I think you crushed it then, June, sorry. Awesome. Okay. Joe, do you mind if I hand it over to you for the policy committee update on the letter? And
Sure.
I think I can pull it up here if that would help.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at it, but the policy committee has, again, on the same subject we talked about today, which is great that Amy and DOTI are so I think we're so in line with them and they're in line with us, obviously. So one of the things that came up was right turn on red, which we kind of talked about for the past several months, didn't include it in our first letter. And it all started out that Lucia, who was on the committee, said that some cities, and I believe it was DC, I looked up, San Francisco has some, as well as Cambridge, Mass, and there was some other Midwestern city that has gone back to prohibiting right turn on red. And we understand that that came about because of the 76 oil crisis and people are just sitting at lights. And we understand it's, been here with us for some 40 some years and everybody sort of kind of likes it, but it is causing some problems. So instead of completely banning it, which was an idea Lucia had, but which would make it pretty easy, you turn right on red and then you're in trouble, as opposed to do I turn right or red or not. So, but we thought we should kind of tone it down a little bit. And so we were looking at where to apply the right turn on red. Now, there's already several places that have it, but we wanted to make sure that the intersections with the high injury history or high risk would have that. And that's sort of what Amy was showing us. There's quite a few intersections that if they don't have it now, they should have it. And so we also see that some signal modification maybe have significant impact. And we understand that bicycles can go a little sooner and you stop. And so you're more aware of that. So you don't always turn right on red when bicycles have the way and other people have the right of way. We talked about some other aspects like changing the radius, as you can see on there. So all of these things are designed to make sure that people aren't turning right on red and causing more problems on those really bad intersections. And when we don't have those intersections, we'll watch to see if something happens. So it's pretty much in line with what Amy was talking about. She didn't mention right turn on red, but I think that could just be another quiver or arrow in her quiver, as they say, to have her add that and look at that. Again, it would be just taking a program that's already there and enhancing it. So I think it'd be pretty low dollars of all the things we're talking about. So if you guys get a chance to read the letter and you have any comments, but we've had a few comments. Alan has commented on it, and so has everybody. So anyway, I'd be interested in hearing what anybody has to say, or if they can get back to us by sometime before next meeting, that would be great.
I had a decent number of comments on the letter. I forgot to share them earlier, but if we're not approving this meeting, I can share them still. So I'll put those on the document.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Sorry, I was hoping to pull it up on the screen. I don't seem to have hosting access and not able to get it, but you should have all received the letter in your email. Also, let's also say Friday on that one, and we can maybe do a digital vote on that letter. I know it's been sitting with the policy committee for quite some time. So yeah, June, add your comments, but I do want to keep this one moving as well, because I know the policy committee has been working on it for maybe 6 months. If that works. Okay. All right, Alan, my co-chair, I left you with so little time. We had such a great discussion on so many things, but can you cover your 2 items in 12 minutes here?
We can do the hurry up offense. Yeah, definitely. So 2 items. Number 1, the first item that we want to chat about is for any of you that may remember the mayor's transition committee for DOTI. One of the items that came up on that is not so much in the transportation side of things, but permitting. We had heard feedback from community that people, remodeling their home or developers trying to build housing or more affordable housing, we're having some challenges in the permitting process. So as a board, I know we have a few members like Joe that are experts in this based on their profession, but myself, I know very little about it. So Jake and I were chatting. We thought it would be a great idea to maybe solicit some feedback from the community to see what ideas community members might have to accelerate the permitting process. I know the mayor and Director Ford are already working on this, but I thought, we as a board can help with this by gathering more input from the community. So I'll share the link to this, but it's a very simple form. Pretty much said, what are the challenges? It talks about, this is just about DOTI permitting, but not for community planning development. So, that's not really our purview, but what are some of the challenges or difficulties that folks are having? What's working well with DOTI permitting? What challenge or what changes or recommendations would you have to make it go smoothly? How would you classify yourself? Is it an individual or a big developer, an architecture firm? What's the scale of the projects that they're working on, just a few a year or lots a year? And then is this impacted ability to build housing? And then if this is optional, people can put in their name of their company or their address. So I'll send out this link to you all so we can gather feedback from the group again to see if folks have any ideas for different questions or way that we're phrasing that would very much welcome any ideas that this group has. Any questions on that?
Alan, I'd just say whatever we can do to support you, if you'd like a presentation from our permitting team or whatever we can do to support you in this.
Yeah, that sounds great, Nick. I know you all are working on it. This is just our way, really, just to gather input for community and pass it on to you all and your permitting team, and you all can decide how to best move forward at that. And if it makes sense to have a fall conversation, we're happy to. Jake, go ahead.
I'll throw this out as a question, but I really mean it as a driving the point home. But this is not for community planning and development permitting, like various layouts and stuff. This is things like right-of-way encroachment, anything that involves DOTI, right?
That's right.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. If someone wants to close down an alley because they're, building something with a development, that would apply to DOTI permitting.
We always think of building face to building face, everything that happens in between.
Great. So we'll send out the link to that. Number 2 is this is more just we want you all to think about this. As you all know, one of our charges to the city is to advise the department on budget and policy, right? So I just wanted to underscore, I'm sure we can have Earl at some point come in and give us a more robust discussion, but I really just wanted to highlight, let me share my screen here, a couple things around bonds, and would love this group to do a little bit of homework here. Let me share my screen. Let's see if it comes up on, yeah, it came up on the right slide. So you all have just gone through a budget exercise of understanding how much money the department has to work with each year. As you all are aware, general obligation bonds, or the city borrowing money essentially to complete projects and paying it back, as Nick mentioned before, is a tremendous source of money. The 2017 bond, just pulling it off the city's website, was over $430 million. for transportation. The 2021 RISE bond was over 60 million for transportation. So I just want to challenge us as a board to start to think about the conversation around what our recommendation would be policy or budget wise to the city, to the department, and ultimately the mayor on what we think a bond priority should be if it comes up at some point in the next few years. This isn't going to be an overnight thing. I just put on the screen the timelines for the Elevate Denver bond. It took several years, and there was a very robust community input process. Same thing with the Rise Denver bond in 2021. But I wanted to show you all some tools that you can start to think about here. The city has an amazing website. Someone in GIS or information technology just did an incredible job of making all this information very accessible to us. So if you just Google Denver bond or Denver Go bond, GO bond, you can see real-time status links on projects through an interactive dashboard and a map. So, Tinsley, for example, if you want to see all the projects that are going on in the far Northeast, you can come to here, and you can even highlight oh, what's going on in my council district here, and it filters it, right? If we just want to say, hey, what's going on transportation wise for the Elevate Denver bond, and you can see there's two filters here. There's a filter for the Elevate Denver bond and the more recent Rise bond. You can see all the projects that are going on citywide here. So I want to encourage, I'll put the link here in the chat. I just want to encourage everybody to start to think about this, what are some of the projects that you all think would be meaningful as we think about this. The other thing that the city does a phenomenal job on being transparent about is how are things going? I know this is a question that's come up with some of you. How are things going on the current bond projects? Well, the city makes this very transparent. So for example, if you want to look at the Elevate Denver bond here, if we just want to look on transportation, again, you can see the dollar amounts that are being put. You can literally hit the filter here, and you can see, hey, there's a lot of stuff in design, there's a lot of stuff constructed, and there's $80 million worth of projects that have been complete. So it's a really, and you can even drill down on your council district or the design pages here. You can click the GES pedestrian connectivity improvements. If you want to click on the citywide projects here, it'll drill down and talk about that even. So just wanted to kind of make this group start to think about what kind of bond priorities and what kind of ideas you might have for recommendations around bond projects in the future. So no specific ask besides maybe start to do some homework on that and think about that, since that is as you guys have seen, a massive sum of money relative to the annual budget. And Director Ford has also shared in chat a map tracking all the transportation projects happening in Denver in 2024. So we can drill down in council districts as well there too. So not just limited to the bond funding projects, but all the projects going on in the city. Any questions, thoughts?
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's a great tool. The city's done a really good job of putting that together for transparency of seeing where things are going. Jake, I'll turn it back over to you. I'll send the link to those here in chat here in a minute.
All right, Alan, you did such a good job. We've got some time left, but we do have the last 5 minutes of our meeting held for odds and ends. I didn't know if anyone had any comments that they wanted to bring up or things that they wanted to cover in our meeting before we wrap. Paul.
I was just going to say, I was seeing here the State of the City address is coming up 2 weeks from yesterday. Anyone else here or any of our DOTI staff in attendance on this meeting planning on being there? I was just curious.
I'm going to go on a limb and say Amy's going to be there, and I don't like to go outside, so I'll probably hold down the fort on there, but we will have a contingency there.
I was just curious. I know this group tends to be very civically engaged. It's open to the public. You do have to RSVP, but there's so many people here I've been Zooming with for coming up on 4 years almost now, who I've never actually met in person. So I figured I'd throw it out there.
Director Lewis.
Yeah, on the 16th, RTD will be celebrating the 50 millionth mile of the A line. There is, I think, a ceremony at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. So I'm sure if you get on the website, you can get more details, but just wanted to point that out. Something positive for a change.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you, Director Lewis. All right. I'm not seeing any hand raises. So after all the speedy topics we did today, you can all have 2 minutes back. Thank you for coming today.
Well done. Thank you.
Great stuff today. Thanks, meeting leaders.
Thank you, guys.
Before we end the meeting, I just want to catch up on the chat. Whoever is, I think Anita's the host.
No, it's fine. You can catch up with the chat.
This is why. Here's Amy's link. I just like to have all these links open. Cool. I think that's all of them, Anita. As always, thanks for running such a great meeting.
Sure. Bye.
Cheers, all.